process of reviewing that, but the, without further ado, you're in Boston, is where you're based out of?
Yeah, I'm based out of Boston.
But he's on his West Coast swing right now. He's been down in Portland, and down in California, a few places, and we're expecting a few more people from Everett and maybe one or two others. But since we don't know what the traffic, I'm sure with the rain on a Monday morning coming in from Everett, they're probably not going to be on time. So I think we probably just get started.
So, has everybody got a book?
Yes.
Did everybody get a book? Perfect. What that is we started the National Farscape Association, and that was because we had started collecting so much information, so much video out there, and documentation that there was no one place to put it. So we created our own little library, and basically, if you go on there to the National Farscape Association, you click in all the pre-recorded classes we've done, and just to give you some that we've done from New England, we've done all the New England states down to Philadelphia, all of New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C. We've done in California, we've done LA County, we're going to be there in July. We've done Portland, 5 years now plus, and so that's some of the features that we're going to talk about today. Seattle's actually probably our first class, you guys, if you remember correctly. The reason I got pulled out here was because you called me. 3 guys almost fell to their death on that wood structure that was screwed into the building.
And actually, I called you even before that because I was in the process then of like all we had was an information bulletin at the time. And
Correct.
so we wanted to switch away from that, and so on the web I was just doing a search of places, and lo and behold, I ended up with you.
Yeah. So this is great to come back. I'm basically what I'm going to do is show you everything that's going on nationally, and you guys can sort of take advantage of that and say, okay, what is everybody else doing right? What is everybody else doing wrong? What has been done right here? What has been done wrong here? What has been done right in Portland, wrong in California and everywhere? So the questions really here is not what's the perfect system. It currently doesn't exist. But the fact that it got started is the best part, and now it's going in the right direction. So we need to answer questions for the fire department. We need to answer questions for the building department. We need to answer questions for housing. We need to answer questions for a lot of people. We have to answer questions for the the inspectors, either the structural engineers or the registered architects. We need to answer questions for the vendors who don't know what to do because they think they know what to do because all they did in the past was throw a little welding on it and we were done. And all of a sudden, even though the ideas of what needs to get done is there, not everybody is up to speed on what it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over I'll go over through all the slides with you. But what you have in your book there, and I'll cover that first so that you know as we get to the pages what has come from all the activities that we've done, and we'll cover today in questions. So prepare your questions. First of all, what you're going to have is a departmental procedures and guidelines, which you guys call administrative rule. Correct? So basically, after you read the law, not everybody interprets the law. So you create administrative rules to basically say, this is how we understand it today, and this is how we'd like you to implement it today. So it's an administrative rule. We've done the same thing throughout the classes that I've taught in the New England states. We started working with the state inspectors and say, hey, if you write what's called the departmental procedures and guidelines, and this is mainly for building departments, because in certain states fire prevention runs everything. In certain states, the building department issues the violations. So about 40 states it's fire prevention, 10 states it's building departments. But they're all trying to accomplish the same thing. So what we did is we generified it and said, okay, here's what you have to do. If you're an inspector and you just got a violation, and one of the things we teach for any violation that you write from now on, all you're ever going to write on it is repair it, paint it, test it. Because as soon as you put that very generic statement on any violation, repair it, paint it, test it, somebody's going to come back to you and say, what do you mean repair it? Repair what? What do you want me to repair? He says, I don't know. You got to get a professional to look at it and tell me not just what I thought I saw, but what else is there that I didn't have. I was only there for 2 minutes. Well, what do you mean paint it? Well, the Farscape now, with the EPA stepping in, has lead on it. So there's certain things you can't do on Farscape, which is weld on them anymore, thank God, because that was the cheating rubber Band-Aid that everybody was putting on. So there's lead issues, but thank God that 90%, 98% of all Farscapes are bolted and riveted anyway, so just changing out bolts. And then you have the repair aspect of it. So we said, hey, if you read this, and I'm sorry, the last question is going to be test. Well, the code says the authority having jurisdiction shall accept by load test or other evidence of strength. And what this class is going to be about is not about pushing load tests. They're very expensive. They buy no bolts. They buy no paint. But sometimes they're a necessary evil. they're actually going to be about other evidence of strength. What constitutes other evidence of strength that you are willing to forego the load test and forego all the liability associated with it? So if you read this very simple statement here, it says, here's how your engineer should act. If you're getting the fire escape repaired, including the report from this guy, and including a permit, it says, here's how the repair guy should act, under the guideline of not the city, but of a engineer of record. Then the third one says, hey, your fire escape most likely, if it's older than 78, has paint, this is how you should act. So we did this is what they're using nationwide now as a sort of a guide. The next thing we're going to talk to you about is obviously OSHA stepped in since 2010, said that if you get caught scraping and painting a fire escape wrong, you get a $35,000 fine. So there's lead paint on every fire escape older than 78. Any of your fire escapes in Seattle older than 78? Okay. The other thing we're going to talk to you, we're going to show you today that you may be astonished to find, we're going to show you the code that OSHA says no building can be worked on, refurbished, without having a second means of egress in place, certified. So a lot of times fire escapes, which we call the bastard child of egress, is the last thing you scrape and paint because you ran out of money. Now it's the first thing you got to do because your building inspectors can't go into a building because OSHA says you have to have two means of egress. So if all of a sudden you get to a building that's being gutted or just the second floor is being gutted and they have a fire escape, that fire escape has to be certified prior to any permits being issued. It's a code. So we're going to show you that code, and what that says is that they're either going to fix that fire escape first or put in a steel structure, a scaffolding tower full of stairs to basically say, well, we've satisfied the means of egress because we are going to do it last, or it's getting taken away because we have a whole new staircase coming inside. But not a lot of people know that OSHA says you can't be working in a building that doesn't have two certified means of egress. I'll show you the code. You'll see it here. Confidence tests. You guys have a confidence test here that the nation has been utilizing in a lot of our classes that are recorded. You go there, they go to your website, they take your PDF or your Word document, and then they put their name on it. Now, some of the things that you have there, and one of the reasons a lot of them know about it, because a lot of my classes, I talk about Seattle, I talk about Portland. There's a few things in your code that you guys soften the language in. It's primarily the attachment into the building that we'll talk about. We'll talk about that today. But look, here's somebody that basically took your PDF or your Word document and put their name, and this is our city. This is Lowell, the model city in Massachusetts, that we basically made this for them. You'll see one more document in there that you guys did not invent, which is Tacoma, was part of our original class with Sue Boxar. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah.
They created, which you guys should create here also, the yearly test. And if you look at the yearly test that Tacoma made, basically this is not by a structural engineer. This yearly test is made by the management company, and every year when they do that one walk through a commercial building, they have to identify three things, and the yearly test is pretty easy. Is it still painted? Has anybody hit it? And do all the pieces function still on it? And then they sign off. So not a professional needs to examine it. It's called a yearly test. Every 5 years it's structural. Every 1 year it's a maintenance or a testing company.
Right, and that's the side of things I told you before that we're going to have on our operating guidelines on what maybe operation if somebody can just say they saw it and still paint it.
Right, and it could be part of your checklist just to, and submitted. Here's a proper examination of fire escapes with photographs. With today's technology, why people are not giving you full photographs of every fire escape inspection attached to your reports. It should be mandatory with today's documents. A lot of times in the building code, when you're touching anything over 35,000 cubic, it needs to have an initial control document. So some of these documents already exist in the code. So here's a preliminary affidavit, and then here's a final affidavit. So a lot of times when it's a small residential, you don't need one of these. But every now and then when you get into a commercial, it's an automatic that a design professional must be attached to that project. So that'll keep a lot of these projects from not having you watch it, this design professional watching it. Repair criteria. A lot of times when you have activities out there, the repair criteria for a fire escape is pretty simple. If there's rust in it, open it up, take the rust out, put a brand new bolt in it. Because you can't imagine how many people leave the rust in there, weld it shut, silicone hide it, so we need to have that. There's some affidavits, and Boston is one of them, where it's all they need to sign is to the best of my information, knowledge, and belief affidavit. That's what it looks like. And that's where all the mistakes have been made. People are getting away with murder on these, what we call opinion letters. And we gotta make sure your confidence tests are not opinion letters. it's nice they have a whole bunch of more questions to answer, but if it still becomes an opinion letter and there's no fear of a load test, see, the main thing we're gonna teach here at this class is that you have load tests in your back pocket. And whenever somebody does not go out of their way to convince you that they've given you other satisfactory evidence of strength, a load test is coming. Otherwise, give me other evidence of strength. So we're gonna describe what other evidence of strength is. Here's how all fire escapes are made. If you look at these drawings, this is all fire escapes. They haven't changed in 100 years. We're gonna show you that most of your masonry connections are only 8 to 12 inches deep into the building. Most of your wood structures is with a through bolt and a plate. That's it. There's no other magical way of attaching to the building and then legs to the ground. So we're gonna cover that so you know how fire escapes have not changed in 100 years. We're gonna talk about continuous path to the ground, catwalks over roofs. We're also gonna talk about a piece of the law that says, you know, the fire escapes, when you look at your building codes, can be no higher, the last piece can be no higher than 9 feet to 12 feet because of trash trucks and such. If you continue reading that code, it also states that you still must provide them other continuation to the ground. It's that you can have the ladder no higher than 9 feet, but then you have to create a guillotine or a drop or a fold out. Well, most people have interpreted the law so that a lot of your fire escapes in your area, they end at 9 and that's it. Grandma's got to jump. So we're going to talk about that. Your tags. You guys have probably the largest tags in the world, you know, but your tags started here in Seattle. And this started with that little red tag. You guys remember you guys used to have a little silly little red tag first. This tagging system is used now and starting to be copied throughout. We're going to talk about the steps to providing a good program, and the good program actually is 3 parts. You guys are writing violation. You need a team to write the right violations, which we believe is now going to start with the captains of the firehouses or the ones that perform the examinations.
Primary annual inspections is
Yeah.
in operations.
Because nationwide, the people that do this is fire prevention is out there walking the streets and writing violations on everything on a building, including fire escapes. And you got the building department in certain states that they go out and write these violations. So we're going to talk about that. You also now have to not only teach people how to write a proper violation without physically getting on fire escapes. We're going to teach you not to get on fire escapes. There's enough evidence from a window and from below when you look up to write a violation. It'll tell you a lot just by looking at it. But we also have to teach the structural engineers and the architects that are looking at these things how to properly inspect. And we also have to teach the vendors how to properly repair. Because sometimes you're educating one side of it and the other 2 sides are still completely lost. So that's what we're going to cover today. So let's, this is basically what's the main purpose of a fire escape. Fire escapes are basically ingress. You know, what you have is, a lot of people don't realize this, but when you guys are basically being taught, the old gray-haired guys teach the new guys coming in case of fire, don't use the fire escape. They say so, and it could be minutes, you know, it could be minutes, it could be a time that could be used to get in the building, get somebody out of the building, or for people to self-evacuate. But if a fire escape is not ready to be used, that's where the problems come out. And that, a lot of times, people don't know that their fire escape's in good order. If you have a tag out of your building and it's white, I know I can use my fire escape. If it's yellow or red, that's an indication to somebody who's in the building to say, hey, I gotta talk to my landlord because I don't wanna pay my rent. And there's another indication here that we need to have other alternatives means, because if I can't go out this fire escape, for how long? Some of the fire escape violations written here sometimes lasted a year with the tag on it, 6 months to a year. So enforcement and fines and fees and penalties must come with these things. You're supposed to get these things done in 30 days. 3 codes that we teach nationwide. Some states base their code off the International Fire Code. And very quick, depending upon structural condition, a load test shall be conducted. So it's up to the fire prevention guy to determine whether or not he wants to order a load test. Not the structural engineer, if he wants to order a load test. Depending on the structural condition, a load test shall be conducted. The NFPA says it best: the authority having jurisdiction shall be permitted to approve any existing fire escape stair that has been shown by load test or other satisfactory evidence to have adequate strength. So we're going to talk about other adequate strength. Now there's certain states, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, that use the NFPA. International Building Code says that you get this testing and certification. All exterior fire escape systems shall be examined, which is your confidence test. Tested, which means you're going to spot repair it and then load test it. So you spot repair any 50, 75, 100-year-old structure here, and you leave behind 1 square bolt. and you take a confidence test, you're receiving an opinion letter, because if that bolt fails, guess who goes to court? That engineer goes to court, but he's going to fight it saying, I rendered an opinion, whereas you're saying, no, we want an absolute, we want assurances. Well, the assurance for that engineer is to say, okay, I've changed 60% of these bolts, 40% are in fair to good condition. To guarantee this whole structure so I don't go to court, I then load test. As soon as I load test it, I can't go to court because I did what the law says. I spot repaired, and then I proceeded to a load test because I have 50 to 75-year-old bolts that are in fair to good condition. Why am I load testing? Because they're old. For no other reason, they're old. And there's another unknown. We didn't verify this 18-inch thick wall that you guys have here and how it's tied in. Everybody looks at the veneer front and they say, oh, it's spalling and I repack. That's the veneer, that's a piece of brick. That's your vinyl siding. That's all it is. The real structure's inside. I'm going to show you some insides of walls when we've opened them up. So the load test is to verify the connection into the wall. But there's ways to avoid that, and that's what we're going to talk about today too. So if you spot repair at the end of this, anybody spot repairs one of your 50, 75, 100-year-old fire escapes, you're going to pull out your trump card, which says, I'm about to throw a load test at this. The average life of a fire escape in its 25th to 50th birthday gets every fastener changed out. In its 25th to 50th birthday. You know why? Because at that time, the guy already in the 25th to 50th birthday of his building, he took out every window and put in new ones. He took out the roof and put in a new one. He took out a boiler and put in a brand new one. He took out all the electrical and put in brand new. He put in new electrical and new elevators in that building. What about the bastard child of egress? She hasn't seen a birthday in how long? And so all of a sudden now you're coming in and you're 50 to 75 years old on something that as long as you give it air and wetness, you guys got more wetness than I care to shake a stick at right now. And what do you have? You have a fire escape that's just been rusting and rusting and rusting, and now you want to just sign off on an opinion? You basically, hopefully at the end of this class, you're going to say, no. If you spot repair any structure here, there's a load test coming. So that's the fear. Well, how do I avoid this load test? Let's refurbish it like it should have been in the 25th to 50th birthday. And as soon as you change every fastener, which is going to account for 97% of the structure, there's going to be one unknown, and that is the tiebacks into the building. What do? You want to stop playing with this 100-year-old structure and moving some bricks around and stuff like that? A 3/4 hole, 5 to 6 inches away through the building with either a plate or epoxy. And believe me, everybody I think is going to go through the plating because you guys have the hole inspectors. And if I have to do 27 holes on this fire escape with epoxy bolts, right? You have the hole inspection and the dust test and all that stuff. Guess what's coming? Really, it's going to be just through bolting it and put it back in place faster. So that's what we're going to be talking about here at the end of this. Now here's the concerns that you guys are going to have that's happening nationwide.
But right now, firefighters are taking down the ladders and rolling up the hoses. But earlier in the night, when they pulled up, there were flames coming out of the side of the building. Firefighters say it was one of the scarier moments because when you pull up to a building and you see children and mothers hanging off the side of the fire escape, smoke swirling around them, they said that's scary, scary stuff. They got up there, they got the ladders up, and they said nobody got hurt.
The fire escape, there was 3 or 4 people hanging off the fire escape. They couldn't get off. They were just on the fire escapes. I had people hanging in their fire escapes at the rear of the building, and on this side of the building, we had a bunch of people on that fire escape.
About 50 people were displaced inside this building. Our firefighters say there's good news tonight. It looks like everybody will be allowed to go back in except the one unit where the fire was in. They said that's good luck to them tonight. I'm Bob Wilson on the scene of Bridgeport, News 8.
50 people. 3 months later, we got called to inspect the fire escape. 6 months later, they still hadn't fixed it. And why is that? I don't know. You've had, when the program started here, there was tags floating around that some people basically asked for extensions, and it's all about enforcement. So it happens that, you know, the idea is there, let's get it started, but not all the players were set up. The violation got written, the engineers were just getting their feet wet on what to do, the vendors were so used to basically painting and hiding, that's all it was. You didn't fix things, you paint it and you hid it. You know, you paint the work and you hide the problems with silicone, and you bring your welding machine. So, and then all of a sudden, when everybody got their first shocker, and what's the first shocker? I've been ignoring this bastard child of egress for 35 years. How much to fix it? $38,000. I remember, I think it was Yesler, the two 10-story ones that I think was one of our first projects that we ever did here, was that Yesler Way, that very tall housing for, you know, room rentals or something right here. I think it was like $160,000 or $190,000 to fix those two. Unheard of numbers. You could paint for a lot less. Well, it wasn't a paint job, it was a full refurb. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of times when you come with these things, you come with some new numbers that are just gonna freak out people. You guys remember the 2003 fire? We got called by random. She was just looking to do a story on fire escapes in the Boston area. So if you guys think you have a problem here, you guys are a fairly new city compared to a 300-year-old city. Now this is, I teach class all over the country. So I was just in Philadelphia a month ago, teaching a class with 50 building and fire. I asked, when's the last violation written? Who wrote the last violation in the past 3 months? One guy raised his hand. I said, who wrote a violation in the past year? One guy raised his hand. Because they're afraid to write a violation that they don't know how to complete the process. I was in Washington, D.C., same room of about 50 to 75 inspectors. One violation written in the past year. Now these things happen, so you're gonna see what, because of that, she thought she was gonna do a 1-minute piece to help people understand that they have a fire escape out their window, and in case of fire, because of the station night fire, you know, evacuate. When I told her that on average, more than 75% out of everything I ever see always fails because it hasn't been inspected in at least 25 years, she didn't believe me. So I gave her a little bit of training, taught her. She went down to the theater district and she started what was supposed to be a 1-minute piece. She came up with this.
The smoke, the flames, and the frightened faces, all in a firefighter's line of duty. But Chief William Hitchcock remembers the night it wasn't the fire that almost stopped him, but the fire escape that broke underneath him.
When the railing just came away from the building.
And our investigation found across Massachusetts more unsafe fire escapes, rusty, deteriorating, crumbling, broken. And what state officials didn't know, the system they set up to keep fire escapes safe is also falling apart.
The potential ramifications are disastrous.
So let's look at this one. This expert ironworker is licensed to build, maintain, and inspect fire escapes. So that over here, for months, we examined
That's
dozens
my
of
evil
them
twin brother, in
with
case
alarming
anybody's
results.
Looking at this today, would this pass inspection?
No.
In dormitories, at theaters, at homes, and apartment buildings.
Rust is actually eating away the metal of the fire escape.
Right.
And the bottom line?
It'll get weak and then eventually it'll fall.
This one has rotted connections. This one missing bolts, twisted metal.
Would the stairs come down?
No, never come down.
This one a broken tread.
So how dangerous is it for the people inside this building?
This fire escape is definitely going to put somebody either in the hospital or it's going to put somebody in a cemetery.
Fire escapes are so critical. The state building code requires they be certified for structural adequacy and safety every 5 years. But our investigation found that safeguard is simply being ignored. Here's proof. We chose fire escapes at random in Boston, Somerville, Cambridge, Worcester, and here in Quincy. We checked building department files
But there's no fire escape certification.
to see if building owners had submitted their mandatory inspection reports.
There's no certification in this one either.
Bottom line, not one we checked in Quincy had been certified as safe. And the Director of Inspectional Services admitted because of staffing shortages, the city has no idea how many other fire escape owners are breaking the rules.
And as a result, do you know how many fire escapes in your city are safe or not?
Well, I don't know.
In Worcester, not one we checked was certified. In Somerville,
No.
4 more fire escapes,
To the fault of the facts? Yeah.
not one up-to-date certification. And again, no system for keeping track. How can they get away?
I guess that the shortest answer of all is because we don't have the resources to sit and follow up on these things.
If structural deficiencies are reported, local building inspectors can actually evacuate residents until repairs are made.
Would you talk to us on camera about this?
But when we surveyed 24 more communities, most admitted they had no idea how many fire escapes were certified. In Taunton, inspectors told us they haven't seen a certification in 25 years. Northampton officials said it's a cold day in hell when that happens. In Cambridge, too, not one of our test buildings was certified, and the official in charge would not come out to discuss it. In Boston, where there are more than 8,000 fire escapes, again, according to inspectional services, not one we checked was certified. Officials know they are required to enforce the building code, but they admit they don't always know if owners are breaking the law.
The building code is being ignored.
Right, but it's difficult to write a violation when you don't have knowledge of something like that.
But state officials say for a critical issue like this, communities should know. And they warn, the Massachusetts building code is not optional.
Does it worry you that these fire escapes are not being certified?
This is an important issue and should not be ignored.
That's because after the smoke and flames begin, it'll be too late to learn you've got no way out.
I can't stress it enough, Hank, that these things have to be maintained and someone's got to be watching.
As a result of our investigation, state officials will now issue an alert to local inspectors. Meanwhile, if there's a fire escape on your home or office, you can contact your local building department to make sure it's properly certified. In the newsroom, I'm Hank Philippi Ryan.
It's a nationwide problem.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it's not just here, it's everywhere. It just fell through the cracks. She was built, you know, solid, and she was supposed to last forever. She is 75 years old plus now. It was the answer to a lot of these buildings that had only one means of egress. Firescape was the only solution on these row houses. Firescapes was the only solution how to turn a factory into condos. Firescapes were the catch-all for everything. So now, look in the back of your book. You want to post that on your wall somewhere. When somebody's complaining to you about a fire escape, let me tell you the people that fire escapes hurt. This happened in Boston. This won a Pulitzer Prize winning photograph for that last shot. A Herald reporter was there when this was on a 4-story building. The fireman was just about to take the woman and her niece out of the 4-story fire escape. The fire escape fell away. The fireman survived by holding onto the ladder with one hand. She tried to grab him and she fell away. She died because the fire escape pieces fell on her and her niece fell on her and survived but was injured. And so at that time, our code read, must be maintained at all times, which is everybody's code. Very few people have the 5-year rule. So maintained at all times, you're relying on the owner to maintain his fire escapes at all time, which is never gonna happen. So they changed the rule only after this. So as soon as there's a tragedy, and again, we came down because those 3 guys fell from a wood structure that was lag screwed into the building that somebody had coated the wall, the wood structure with a stucco, and there was rain in the roof that came between the stucco and the thing, ate the wood and ate the screws, and these guys were, I think, out having a smoke on the fire escape, rent tenants of the place, and they fell down. They didn't die. But I think it was 3 years or 4 years later, their lawyer called me, looking for evidence about the information. I don't know if it's still ongoing, but I think they started a lawsuit, and I don't know where it's at now, but I remember about a year or 2 ago, there was a lawyer that approached us on that information of that particular address. Up on the hill.
Yeah, I'm not really familiar with that one at all. I know about 5 or 6 years ago we had a fire. We had a fire escape that twisted out.
Yeah, no, this is 3 guys that actually fell. They were on the 3rd floor, 4th floor, and they actually fell into the backyard. But it was, I don't know the exact address, but it was up on the hills. So with that, this is what you want to use to remind you when somebody's giving you a hard time about fire escapes, if you have to load test them, or you have to literally fabricate them and reinstall them back to the building. So take an existing structure, and when you refurbish, you basically take every fastener that's outside, cleanse all the rust inside the connections, and then the only thing left is how it's attached to the building. If you can satisfy those, you have what's called other evidence of strength. There is no load test. So that's what we're going to talk about today. By the way, this is the OSHA. Write it down, 1910.37. During new constructions, right? And during repairs or alterations, employees must not occupy any workplace unless the exit routes required by this subpart are available and the existing fire protection are maintained, or until alternate fire protection is furnished that provides an equivalent level of safety. What's that mean? If they don't want to fix the fire escape at the beginning of the project, scaffold it and you're fine. It's fine with me, man. Put a brand new OSHA compliant stairway and we're good. So this is residential, this is commercial, this is institutional, this is everybody. You basically tell the guy, hey, did you get a lot of money for this project? He goes, yeah. Spend some of it right now on the fire escape before you run out of money, and you're just gonna throw a paint job at the end of this thing. Okay? So, and this happened because of my Philadelphia class. I happened to be looking at some OSHA stuff, and I tripped over this, so don't think I knew this. I didn't know this, but and you find these things as you keep. There's not a lot of information out there. We're pretty much wrapping it up as what's out there, and this one was an important piece because it puts new emphasis to any building permit being pulled. So now, what did she get when she did that Channel 7 news piece? Immediately, here's some trigger that you can do immediately in the building department. Because of what happened in Boston, now Boston, you can pull any permit you want in Boston. Change your toilet, pull a permit. Change your electrical, pull a permit. Try to close the permit, guess what you need to close the permit? A copy of the current affidavit. They're not telling you to inspect the fire escape, they want you to provide them a copy of the current affidavit. So that's what the building department did. They created a checklist item that just says to close any permit. The question is, do you have an interior or exterior means of egress? Exterior. Great. I need a copy of the permit. Of the affidavit, the current affidavit. Oh, well, come out and look at it. No, we don't need to inspect it. You should already have one. I just need it so I can close the file. Otherwise, so you don't hold up vendors and their money, close the permits, but it's incomplete. It's not closed. It's waiting now for the affidavit for it to be complete. Otherwise, you write the violation. If they don't have it, like, well, I don't know, then there's already a new violation written right there from the building department say, I need a copy of your current affidavit. You don't have one, I'll close the permit, but now it's basically either it gets referred back to fire and a violation notice goes out saying you need to have an inspection done. Now on fire department, when you guys go in, the last thing you do to open up a building is a smoke detector test, right? Or the smoke detector sign off. You ask for, as a checklist item, you ask for a copy of your current affidavit. So, because when the alarms go off, where do you go to get out of the building? To the egress. So you basically say you perform. So all fire prevention's out there now. We're doing their inspections for the smoke, and they're adding a checklist item. I just need a copy. They're not ordering a test. They didn't see anything that generated a test. They're asking, I need a copy to close this. They say, I don't have one. I haven't done one in 30 years. Not a problem. You still close the smoke detector process, but now it generates an a requirement for the affidavit. So it becomes two natural triggers that doesn't change any of the routine for your inspection. You're not looking for fire escapes anymore. They're happening on permit triggers or smoke detector triggers. Got it? As Jay told me, you guys no longer look at section 1030?
Well, no, I didn't say we didn't look at it because the maintenance part of this is fire.
And
The rest of
testing and
chapter
maintenance.
10 is mostly.
Very vague over here. All two-way communication systems for areas of refuge shall be inspected and tested on a yearly basis to verify that all components are operational. When required, the test shall be conducted in the presence of a fire official. Are they talking about radios or are they talking about fire escapes? I don't know either. I found it myself and I'm like, is this a communication? Is this
It's like an intercom.
so?
from the
But I
area
found
of
this under general maintenance of the
Right.
egress, and I'm asking. It says it talks about reliability, so it's very vague here.
For area of refuge, because that's part of alternative to egress is to get an area, so I guess.
No, again, I'm not gonna. I'm just here throwing things out to show you guys what you guys have. What you guys have is this for fire escape testing.
And now 2012, so the new one we're working on is 2012 actually puts in the 5-year testing cycle.
Perfect. The one thing that we recommend, and when you see that, and hopefully we can help you out, if you read what we wrote here, is it needs a little bit of information that basically says, here's the basic guidelines for an inspector, here's the basic guidelines for a repair guy, here's the basic guidelines for a painting guy, and that's gonna help a lot of people not sort of, dodge bullets, because it's very easy to dodge some of these bullets because nobody's basically educating all facets of this fire escape repair. They're starting at the top, sometimes they start at the bottom, and some people in the middle just get, left out of the educational loop.
And that's our informational bulletin, that's not our admin rule, so that's supposed to be for the general public. Hopefully, as we revise this, we'll work with DPD on, hopefully do joint
Yep.
information.
And what they've done is a lot of times they'll put this on their website, so it's a printable document, or they have it on their counter, so when they get a violation, they have one of these administrative rules, or they have one of these repairs and procedures and guidelines, okay? So here's your confidence test that's pulled right off. And basically, it says, you know, let's get the information going, let's yes and no the questions. There's a general side, there's a structural side, right? But the problem is not the problem, you know, one of the key ones is gonna be, I think, number 19. Because you do, I think it's 14 and 15 and 16. Acceptable to a structural engineer, verify the connections into the building. You know, the only way you're getting connections, because I've worked with a lot of these structural engineers, it was RFA was one. There was only about a dozen guys that played in the fire escape realm in the past 5 years, and some of the bigger players said, you know, they thought there was money there, only to say, no, there's just nothing but complicated headaches there because nobody really wants to do the right thing. When the code is there to enforce the right thing, everybody starts getting into it because there's money to be made. But when all of a sudden everybody screams and hollers, calls the mayor, calls the fire chief, calls everybody and starts basically saying, what are you doing? You know, we have to give you guys some alternatives, because a lot of times this takes 3 to 5 years to implement a plan, because it has to be slowly. And so this permit activity, people are already spending money on a permit, so they're gonna do whatever it takes to close that permit. This thing about the smoke detectors, usually to get somebody to come into my apartment and start renting, guess what they're gonna do? They're gonna do whatever it's gonna take to move things together, slowly inject the process to make sure it's done correctly. But we're gonna talk about some changes that we've made to other groups who use this as a starting point.
Well, and that's a question I had, is no matter what we do with building department, fire department, all this stuff, we can put that on the design professionals, structural engineers, do any of those guys really know any of this stuff on how to check for fire escape stuff and the structural? I mean,
we really don't have any state certified special inspection agencies.
Well, here's the thing.
So how do we teach them to do the right thing, I guess?
Well, what we did down in some of these cities, and we did this in Portland, we had about 150 guys. We had fire prevention, building department, all the engineers that were inspecting were in the class, and all the vendors working in Portland were in the class. We had about 150 guys in the class, and we recorded it. The second thing we did is, right after the class was over, about 25 guys did a downtown walk around, and we recorded that on what to look like now for fire escapes that were recently certified or recently load tested. And we're gonna show you some of the load testing requirements down there. They don't want 100 pounds per square foot, they want 200 pounds per square foot. You know what I'm saying? So there's some things going on out there that basically they took general knowledge out there that applies to bridges, and they morphed it back to this, you know, we call the bastard child of egress. And it's like some of the stuff is insane, including when you load test a fire escape, you gotta separate all the components. So if I'm gonna load test a platform, I have to separate the stairs from it so that I'm not sharing any of the load, and then take your standpipe and separate that off. It's just, so load testing can become, so this is not a load test class. This is a class to say that when somebody doesn't do their job and make you satisfied that they've reached other evidence of strength, you're like, okay, you know what, where's my load test card? And you just drop that on the table to say, hey, we're gonna go to load test so that everybody doesn't get sued. The city doesn't get sued, the engineer doesn't get sued, the owner can't get sued because we performed a load test. But if you provide them other evidence of strength, you can't get sued either. Because if I change every fastener, I reconnect it back into the building, and there's a failure 2 years from now, what happened? It was a product failure. The bolt sheared. Well, who do we sue when a bolt shears? So you sue the bolt manufacturer, because we did what the law said. So that's where we're heading with a lot of this stuff that we're talking about. So this is, you remember there was no confidence test. Remember we created a confidence test and you guys grabbed a lot of the questions? So when we first got here, there was no confidence test. That was, you know, we had the first national confidence test, and now this confidence test, you're gonna see Portland has a confidence test, LA has a confidence test, New England has a confidence test, and what are they? They're all based off the original questions that we asked to say, hey, no more opinion letters from you engineer guys that say, to the best of my information, knowledge, and belief, the fire escape is in conformity with the state's code, which is basically saying what? It's a drive-by, fly-by. You just basically roll down your window, you look at the fire escape, the guy threw enough black paint on it, you get a $1,000 check, you hand this opinion letter. When you go to court, what happens?
It's just an opinion.
He asked me for my opinion, I gave it to him. But your yes-no questions, it scares the hell out of all these engineers. Some of them don't want to get into this racket because they're like, well, there's yes-no questions here. Yeah, there is yes-no questions. So because of that industry standard and because it exists on your website, Tacoma's website, LA's website, what happens now, there's this industry standard out there that's getting sort of test-driven throughout. So as you guys saw, this is what happened to us. We had to have somebody die in order for for this to happen. This happened back in '71. Here's other live load tests that ended in the same tragedy. A woman, because the railing was missing over there. This is on a hill. So this is a 5-story, and this is a 5-story, but because it's on a hill, this 5 stories window basically feeds the neighbor's roof deck. And this is a high end of Beacon Hill in Boston, and there's tons of money, and everybody has a beautiful deck. So this guy and his girlfriend came back at 2, 3 in the morning from partying all night. They decided to go to the neighbor's roof deck and party. The phone rings back. His girlfriend says, "I'll go get it." She comes back to answer the phone, but she doesn't know how to cross the perilous bridge that's missing the rail, and so she fell and died 5 stories. There's another one, another live load test, because that's what you have. You do a live load test at 100 pounds per square foot using sandbags, water, cabling, or use firemen or tenants. So here's another tenant one. School kids. And so what happens, here's another live load test. This is a guy who took 5 buildings and made 5 condos. Him and his son did the roof. Look at all the rust on there. And basically he lifted the fire escapes off, put the roof in himself, him and his son, so he could sell it off his condos. Then he put everything back, and he, like a good mechanic, he had bolts left over from the engine rebuild. What happens? What do you do with those?
Throw them out.
Never needed them. So they basically fell. There was 5 people. There was a buyer, a seller, 2 real estate agents, plus one of the condo association people up on the fire escape, and they only fell 12 feet. Everybody started suing everybody. Nobody died. There's another one in Iowa where we're expert witnesses in a lot of fire escape cases. That brought me out to Iowa. 4th of July, 3 kids are watching the fireworks on this building that is owned by a guy who owns like 40 of these things, and he rents out the kids all the time. And so they're watching fire escape, but his guys had recently done some work on the window or on the siding, and they put back the fire escape that was through bolted originally, and they put it back with a lag screw into the same 1/2-inch hole. So a 1/2-inch lag hole into a 1/2-inch screw. And where did we find this? We found, after this tragedy, and that's what happened. It fell, hit this roof, hit the ground. This is all the blood. This is that piece that used to be up there. When they fell to the ground, right, they basically took the fire escape and, like a good fire escape CSI, where do you keep it? In a field, like 8 blocks away. They threw it in a field.
This looks like the lake.
Now this is us, don't mind the photographer here, but we actually found the pieces in the field, and we found the smoking gun, which is when we grabbed the bracket, the bolt was still in it. Well, that's the lawyers talking. Mind gentlemen, when you hear the word gentleman, that means it's a lawyer talking. He says he found the smoking gun. So basically, it was just funny that we got in this field, and this stuff was just like, CSI investigation. We're like, but so they put it back, and they were so scared when they put it back that now that they threw bolt, they put a leg on it, and there was no legs here before. And then even on the leg, it's right into the asphalt shingles. There's no, what do you call it? A sleeper, pressure treated sleeper or something. It was funny. It's comical. So other live load testing. By the way, in case you only think that firemen can die, tenants can die, this is not the shop, but this is when we fix fire escapes, right? One of our group people that's a part of our group in Chicago, his father fell 7 stories to his death while doing the exact same activity on a fire escape. Fixing, changing a bolt, and you just took out the wrong bolt, and boom, 7 stories. So, now, how many parades you guys have in town where everybody climbs on every window known to man and gets on these TikTok grenades, right? So, you wait till one of these collapse, and you see what's going to happen when they're going to come down about these. What are you doing about inspections? How come you haven't been enforcing? And then all of a sudden you have a half-started program. You know what that means? That now you're open to lawsuits because it's half-started. You've touched the situation, then you started ignoring it again, and that's when why didn't you stay on top of it? So it is 75-year-old grandmas out there are being load tested with a bunch of kids. In Harvard University, they're building similar to this. And a lot of times on these Harvard, they have this very ornate cast iron top. And the same thing was happening during one of the parades in Harvard Square. And everybody was leaning, and then all of a sudden that cast top fell. The sidewalk was filled with people, and it came down like a spear. And it just missed some people sitting on the steps, just underneath it. And it speared and ricocheted. And nobody got hurt. But it was basically incidents like that are coming. You guys remember when we had no AC and everybody slept in fire escape? You have fire departments that sometimes have to evacuate somebody only out of a fire escape. That happens quite often. They somehow can't get in the front or something's happening. And as you guys know, when all hell breaks loose, the only way you're going to get out of the building is through a fire escape. And you don't got time to test the fire escape. Weddings are being shot on it. Kids are hanging out on fire escapes. A lot of these now, which is very important to note, a lot of these charter schools are taking over not schools, they're taking over buildings. They have a fire escape on it that does not meet the current code. If you have a fire escape on a factory that they turn into a charter school and it has ladders, it's illegal. That fire escape must be brought up to code because it's a different use for that building. They can still keep the fire escape, but it's got to be all the way to code. Yes.
Hey Cisco, how's FDNY dealing with this? Because they got to have the greatest share of fire escapes in the country, right? I mean,
Which one?
FDNY.
Oh, FDNY. Okay, let's move on because I documented this. Who inspects fire escapes? So it's really about. Sometimes the elephant in the room is so ginormous. The only thing you have to do, which you guys did, and which 5 years ago we started this, is this. That's all. Just and I tell people when you're in doubt, at least lean forward, because if you fall on your face, you fall forward. Just don't lean back, because you're gonna lose track. If you're just lean forward, and somebody's gonna kick you in the head, and somebody's gonna come and say, "This is what are you doing?" And it's all about money. But it's also about grandma being 50 to 75 years old, and you guys are loading her with life. Tenants, firemen, workers. And what you should have an administrative rule here, it's very simple, that all rent checks from now on are going to be collected only by the landlords through the fire escape on the exterior of all windows. So everybody just tape your rent check to the outside of your window, call your landlord, say, "Hey, my check is here. I noticed you didn't pick up the last 2 months, but I'm going to tape my next check right to the other envelopes." And you're going to see how many fire escapes get fixed. But sadly, very few landlords die in this situation. So who inspects fire escapes? Engineers, design professionals, not structural engineers, design professionals, unless you specifically point out that you want structural. And let me point this out. It's not important that you have to, the cure here is not a structural engineer that's going to cure this. Yes, it can be a structural engineer, it could be an engineer, a PE, it could be a registered architect, but it has to have, if you have guidelines already set up, it's not, you might be eliminating a lot of people.
Well, just for everybody else's information, is that's where Washington is a little bit different. In about 5 years ago, they established the significant building things where a structural engineer at that time had to do anything 5 stories and over. And I think this last not code cycle, but legislative cycle, they went to 10 stories and over. So just for you.
So this is going to fall under. You only have a few fire escapes here that are 10 stories plus. It's not. I'm not saying not the structure. The cure here is not structural engineers. The smartest guy on the post here is going to be the structural engineer. But if you have a good confidence test, you have a good criteria and guidelines, there's a lot of people that you can get. But nationwide, here's the people who inspect. Anybody that's an engineer has been signing off on fire escapes nationwide. Architects have been signing off on fire escapes nationwide. You have city officials, which everybody thinks every time you walk anywhere near their building, you sneeze near their building, they say that you did an inspection and everything's fine. So they think you guys are inspecting fire escapes. And we have fire escape inspectors. There's only 2 licenses in the country that can inspect fire escapes, right? And this is how sometimes, like you say, we're still playing catch up. In Boston, a G3 license allows me to sign off on a fire escape, okay? And a structural engineer to sign off on a fire escape, a G3 license. That means if I'm an ornamental guy where ironworks and railings and window guards, and you fix fire escapes and build them, you can inspect them and sign off on them too. So, any room for error there? Yeah. In California, you got a Reg 4 license put up by the fire prevention. Now, it's 100 questions, $1,000. I got to get at least an 80, and I'm a fire escape tester. of
So
assemblies.
the fire department has a basically certified technician test.
Exactly, part of their regulation 4. So I recommend you guys look at that because they regulate everybody down there. You know, sprinkler guys have to go through that testing. So regulation 4 in LA, it's a great model to copy. Reg 4 they call it, right? So I had to pass the test with an 80, pay my $1,000 every 3 years. I had to also go down there and walk the fire escape and do an inspection and then fill out the paperwork correctly. They just recently, surprise, surprise, put in a confidence test, documentation, yes, no questions. But we didn't get an invite to the parade or anything that came from that. But so there's only 2 licenses out there that can inspect. In Boston, I've been inspecting for Harvard University for 15 years now, all 375 of their fire escapes. And they can afford all the engineers in the world, yet, you know, I'm the engineer of record, not the engineer of record, I'm called a fire escape engineer, not a structural engineer. Just like you'd call a train engineer or a sanitation engineer or a landscape engineer. There's lots of engineers out there, building engineer. But there's a license, and there's only 2 licenses in the country, Massachusetts and LA. And in some states, they don't allow us to cross over, so we have to use a PE from that state to countersign a lot of our inspections. Got it? This fire escape, pass or fail? Fail? Well, the reason I got called out on this fire escape in Fort Lee, and believe it or not, this building was the Hollywood of the talkies time. You know, the silent pictures. This is where it all started when everything was a silent movie era, and then the talkies started there before everything came out to Hollywood. So the secretary called me and said, "Hey, I got a letter from an engineer, and I don't believe it. You know, I think there's something more wrong with this fire escape because somebody fell through it during a police night investigation. The cop fell through one of the stairs, and so that's what's prompted this violation." And this is the letter that he wrote. He says, "Fix these 4 things. Fix a bend in one of the platforms. Put that stair back. Give it a scrape and paint, and I'll sign off on it." We did an examination, and we basically, look how tall that thing is. We condemned the fire escape.